Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
Do you know that the name Selena is supposed to remind you of the clinking of champagne glasses? You don't? Then listen to the way this name sounds and imagine a holiday, New Year's Eve, icy champagne and bubbles that tingle your tongue and throat. It's also a name that sounds so affectionate. Anyway, that was her name, even though she lived in a place where champagne wasn't in vogue, in a village at the end of the world. That's because she had a mom with a wacky mom. Well, you have to start with the grandmother. When her grandmother, a street Petersburg artist, after serving her time in the camps, was exiled here for eternal settlement, and after what she went through in Alaska, behind barbed wire, life in a village on the Volga seemed to her like a paradise. Friends sent money and she bought a house, a wooden house with blue shutters. Grandmother worked in the House of Culture. She painted scenery and posters, washed the floors and stoked the stoves. Then Selena's mother came here to sew costumes. For the dance group and choir, for the drama club and variety group. All the women in their family had golden hands, and all committed a mésalliance. Grandmother was afraid to return to her hometown. It seemed to her that she would immediately be sent away again, and she got used to it, adapted to rural life. She married a forester, and then her daughter, my mother, married a farmer, the richest man in the village. He raised cattle, sold milk and cheese, and he was good-looking, witty, and he didn't stop her mother, Ariana, from doing what she loved, and she loved to sew. At first, she intercepted with a keen eye. The local craftswoman shared their secrets. Then she got to something on her own. And when she was taken as a costume designer in the House of Culture, it was pure bliss. No task frightened her. She sewed costumes for the fairy tale Cinderella, and sundresses for folk dances, and motley skirts for gypsy dances. Her whole life was in these scraps, threads, needles, in the clatter of the sewing machine, in fitting. She created outfits like some kind of miracle, sometimes almost out of nothing. And as Selena could remember the earliest childhood, when she was not yet walking and talking, she would remember the costume room, countless rows of hangers, and her mother humming at the sewing machine. But the girl began to realize herself since she went to kindergarten, and here there was nothing special. The smell of burning milk in the morning, semolina porridge, which all the kids hated, a playroom carpeted with carpet, and dressed-up dolls in the locker. The teachers did not always allow to take them, only for good behavior. Otherwise, here you have balls, pyramids, and stacked soft toys. In the kindergarten, Selena got a friend, Katie. She joined the group later than the others. Her family had moved to the countryside, and Katie was brought to the daycare center in the middle of the year. She was special. Selena felt it immediately. Katie was the best at reciting poems and singing songs, and she was not afraid of the teachers if they were angry and raised their voices. Katie invented new games and was never bored with her. All the kids wanted to be friends with her, and she singled out Selena. I don't know why. Selena just followed her around like everyone else, her mouth hanging open and marveling at her jokes, her dresses and ribbons, her pranks. But somehow, Katie decided that Selena was her second self, and from then on they were seen together everywhere. Kathy taught Selena how to draw horses. Katie said she was going to be a famous horsewoman or a great actress. She made up games or told stories, all so mesmerizing to Selena that she immediately recognized her friend's superiority, and that the boys looked up to Katie was no surprise. Selena's mom, Ariana, was also interested in the acquaintance. Katie's father was a construction manager. New houses were built in the village, 2 and 3 stories. Then there was a whole complex, a cafe downstairs and a department store upstairs. The building of the polyclinic was built new, replacing a small barrack, and a lot of other things. And Katie's mom didn't work. She's my house fairy, the girl told her friends in all seriousness. Mom says, in the house all the time must live someone to be cozy and warm, and she's my house fairy. Selena didn't quite believe it. Katie's mom didn't have wings, but the girl was fascinated by what was at her friend's house and what she didn't have. Fragile figurines, a ballerina frozen in a pirouette, the mistress of Copper Mountain with a lizard in her arms, the Swan Princess, the one with the star burning in her forehead, all lived high on the shelves. But Katie's mom took one of the fairy tale characters down every day for the girls to play with. And she had rings on her fingers, and the stones sparkled so beautifully. And Genia's mom baked a Napoleon cake, a luxury Selena hadn't tasted at home. And the girls went to school together too. The school is far away at the entrance to the district center. Most kids can't get here in the fall slush and winter ice. That's why a yellow bus with the inscription "Children" on the side took them in the mornings, and after classes, it took them back to their homes. These first school years, bouquets of asters of all colors of the rainbow, new dressy uniforms, corridors, huge, on which you want to run so much, but you can't. They catch you by the hand, and they write down the names, and then they hang a leaflet where a lightning bolt is drawn and all the violators of discipline are listed. Selena was shy by nature. She never wanted to draw attention to herself. She was the kind of girl they say is quieter than water, lower than grass, and the teacher's remarks have set her almost to tears. Katie was always thinking of something and got into various messes. She would go ice skating with the boys when the ice on the lake was still thin, and luckily she would fall through only knee-deep. Then on a dare he will pet the big sheepdog, which is feared by all the boys, and which from time to time comes off the chain. He will invent a secret language, consisting of words and gestures, which all the boys will immediately master and begin to explain themselves in it, throwing the teachers into anger and panic. But it was Selena, not her perky friend, who got into real trouble. Selena was stolen. This case was remembered for a long time because it was the first time such a story had happened, and nothing like it had ever happened again. Selena was 10 years old at the time. She was returning on the school bus with everyone else, but she got off one stop earlier to go to the store to buy new notebooks. The store was in the center of the village, and it took about 20 minutes to walk from here to home. Selena chose notebooks with beautiful pictures on the covers, paid, then she was hurried by the ladies in line. In short, she didn't notice that she had left a bag with a sports uniform and a change of shoes near the counter, so she walked with the backpack behind her back. She was already approaching her house when a car pulled up next to her and an unfamiliar man called out, "Hey girl, isn't this yours?" In his hand, he held a familiar green bag. Selena gasped. She would have gotten in trouble at home, of course. Taking it, the uncle opened the door. She trustingly approached. Who could have known that she would be dragged into the car at the same moment so that she wouldn't have time to make a sound? They searched for Selena for a week. Notices were posted on every fence and every pole. Volunteers combed the forest, searched even in the lake and in the river. And after a week, no one, neither the police nor her volunteer helpers, hopes to find the girl alive. There was no hope left. Fortunately, Selena's kidnapper was no maniac. All he wanted was to make some easy money. That's why he waited until everyone was sufficiently scared and would be willing to pay any amount to get the girl back. It seemed to him that he planned everything clearly and correctly, and asked for as much as $500,000. With this money, the kidnapper expected to go far away and start his own business. But once he called Selena's parents and told them his demands, his fate was sealed. Maybe if he'd been more experienced and organized things differently, things would have worked out. But as it was, so it was. Selena's mom could not talk to the kidnapper. The woman was lying in bed. She was sedated. Her father was told by the police to arrange a meeting. The appointment was at the gate of an abandoned factory. Harry took with him a bag of money, stood holding it in front of him. As soon as the kidnapper arrived, he was immediately taken. It turned out that the villain lived in a neighboring village. He did not know Pavel personally, only heard about him as a wealthy man. The kidnapper was also offended by the fact that he was detained, questioned, and threatened with trial. The girl lived with me like my own daughter. I fed her, gave her food, showed her cartoons on TV. I didn't let her outside, though. And it's true, Selena, though she cried these days, because she was separated from her parents, but otherwise did not suffer in any way. The doctor examined her and said that the girl would obviously forget everything soon. Selena's abduction cost her parents a lot more. The father blamed the mother. Kathy's mother is doing the housework, and I told you to stay home. There's always enough work to do. We have a car. You could have studied, passed your driver's license, taken your daughter to school, and picked her up. But you're like the last girl. You collect your rags and run to the House of Culture with them. Alinka is abandoned on her own. Ariana not only felt deeply guilty, she kind of lost it after the whole thing. Now, several times a day, she would stand motionless, staring straight ahead, her lips moving soundlessly. It was useless to touch her at such times. It went on like that for months, and then Harry left the family. He had a young girlfriend, it turned out. Maybe it would have ended in divorce, but the drama escalated and eventually became a reason to sever old ties. Harry sold the farm and moved away with his young wife. "I know my strength now," he said. "I'll make a new start. Lucy and I will move south. I'll get land again, buy cattle. The winter is not so long there. The climate is favorable. Things will pick up." But before he left, my father insisted that Selena be sent to a boarding school. There was one in the district center, especially for children from remote villages. Here parents didn't have to worry about them. Caretakers were always watching the children. The building is huge. Here are classrooms here, in another wing, bedrooms and dining room. The children walked under supervision in the schoolyard, and no stranger would enter the boarding school without asking. There was a guard at the entrance. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Selena's story, so there were no obstacles to registering her at the boarding school. Harry also talked to the director, adding that the girl's mother was sick in the head. "So I ask you very much, let the daughter be with you even on vacation. I will try to carve out time to come at least a couple times a year to visit her," he said. Harry made a favorable impression on the principal. She promised to honor his request to keep mother-daughter contact to a minimum. Selena was a homely girl, and for the first time at boarding school, she was homesick. She also had a harder time than the others. The bedroom was big for 8 girls. Selena got the worst bed by the door. The walls, painted with green oil paint, dross, and almost always after bedtime. Selena covered herself with a thin blanket, which did not save her from the cold, and cried quietly, so as not to wake the girls. Almost all of her classmates were taken home for the weekend by their parents. Selena stayed at the boarding school in the company of several children. Something was constantly breaking down in the boiler room, and the boys were freezing. The principal only sighed when she was told that it was 15 degrees in the bedrooms. "Let the children take second blankets. What else can I do? The boiler's dying." The girls brought blankets from home, some of them cotton, some down. They brought warm sweaters and jackets. Selena's mother was told to be wrapped up at the entrance. It happened here too. From time to time, children of parents who drank or were scandalous or both were brought to the boarding school. It happened that someone attacked the teachers with profanity or even raised a hand. Selena's mother was in the same category. It was easier to keep her out. "Bring 200 grams of candy Kuralka in the transfer, and nothing else is not necessary. We will not accept," they told her. "The children have everything. They are all provided here. We don't take tangerines and oranges, or your daughter will take the fruit and give it to someone, and we have children with allergies." Selena's mother didn't work at the cultural center anymore. She couldn't concentrate on patterns and fabrics, needles and scissors. Everything was falling out of her hands, but she had to earn a living, so she went to work for the very man Harry had sold the farm to. He'd worked hard in his time and had raised a fine herd of pedigree goats, and Ariana took to caring for the animals without a word. She fed and fed, cleaned up manure, milked, and if necessary, she helped the owner to treat the wards. In a short time, the woman changed. If before she was pretty, cheerful, coquettish, now it was difficult to recognize her. Her hands, previously delicate and manicured, were now calloused. There was no place on the farm for the nice, smart clothes Ariana loved so much. An old jacket, rubber boots, old pants. All this woman now did not take off. She'd forgotten her makeup too. And the smell of the stable was more persistent than any perfume, even 10 times washed at home. Not being strong by nature, Ariana was so tired that in the evening she only had the strength to drink tea with a piece of bread and fall asleep. And yet she did not feel unhappy. The family broke up, but the daughter was alive. That's the main thing. And the mother held out hope that sooner or later they would be together again. Besides, Ariana had grown attached to the animals, and socializing with them helped her to heal. The goats and goat kids, each with their own personalities, stubborn and funny, surrounded her from morning to night. and caring for them in some way healed her wounded motherhood. Jacob, the owner, was not a bad man, and the main thing was that he was reasonable. If an animal got sick, he called a veterinarian and then calculated whether it would cost a lot to treat it and what would be more profitable, to try to put the goat on its feet or to put it away in the freezer. So he acted accordingly. Ariana tried to nurse every goat, even the weakest one, to give it a chance. She didn't think about the future yet. She only hoped that Selena would safely graduate from school and return to her. The attitude of the teachers at the boarding school to Selena's mother changed only when the girl began to study in high school. During all this time, the father, who vaunted how he loved his daughter, never once visited her. There were a lot of reasons, and went far away, and things in a new place was a lot, and new children were born. And if the first time he still called his daughter to congratulate her on her birthday, then later in this formal communication came to naught. And the mother came every weekend. When she was denied a date on one pretext or another, she and Selena communicated through the window. That's where Jenkins' secret sign language came in handy. And on summer vacations, there was nowhere to go. Selena was allowed to go home. After all, Ariana was not registered with a psychiatrist. And although the woman has changed a lot in appearance, health to her little by little returned. Time and constant communication with animals turned out to be the best doctors. The 3 summer months seemed to Selena a period of carefree happiness. Living in her own home, helping her mother on the farm, and Katie made sure that the vacations were filled with adventures, like a generous Santa sack of presents. And every time Selena thought that her friend had thought of something quite unbelievable, but Kathy convinced her that everything was possible and it would be great. You would think of some quieter entertainment, said Katie's mom, as they say now, girly. Well, go to town, go to the movies, wander around the mall, have a coffee. I can understand that. You mean we have to go to town every day? Katie asked. It's a long summer, it's crazy. What do the other kids do? Everybody finds something to do without going to extremes. Yeah, Katie said ironically. The boys ride mopeds around the streets at night, just dodging them. And the girls have only this beach, a trampled spot. The circus comes to the House of Culture twice a summer, and that's it. Only to hang out in their own backyards, right? Look how Sasha sings. Voxelnaya Street, the most central street. Girls on a bench, chewing on seeds. Mom waved her hand and stepped back, repeating the usual shorthand. Don't go into the woods where there are hunting grounds. Watch your feet carefully. We have plenty of vipers here. Don't swim in unfamiliar places. There are pools on the river. As soon as it gets dark, go home. Katie nodded, pretending to agree with everything, and rushed to her friend, her heels glistening. This time, too, Selena had no time to marvel at how good it was at home, how the lilac bush had grown under her window, how strong the old dog's memory was, how happy he was to see her. She had no sooner laid out her things than Kathy was already here. I have a plan, she said solemnly. I'm sure you do, Selena sighed. Don't get your hopes up. I want to help my mom. She's so tired in the evenings. She's been exhausted for a year. She'll feel a little better with me. 3 days. Katie pointed her fingers, just 3 days. And then I'll help your mom too. I'll even weed the damn beds, which I hate. So what have you come up with this time? No, wait. You can't just tell it like that. It has to be detailed. I'm staying at your place tonight, then we'll talk. The round of the day's business began. It was hot, unbelievable even for June, and the air itself seemed to melt. But Katie, who was so hard to entice to the vegetable garden at home, together with her friend carried watering cans, watered vegetables, and weeded strawberries. The girls were free only in the evening. They asked to go to the river. Though it was a long way to go, but it was worth it. The meadows were in bloom, and Selena, who was imprisoned in the walls of the boarding school all year, was seized by the delight of an unprecedented sense of freedom. She wanted to spin, throwing her head back, under this vast blue sky, and that together with her spinning and puffy as cotton candy clouds, and these flowers, the intoxicating smell of honey, and the river, which was visible in the distance. The girls ignored the small beach, where mostly all the locals went, but it was worth crossing the ravine, without fear of nettles, crossing a dilapidated bridge, and deep into the forest, as you could come to a wonderful place. Right in the middle of the river was an island, The river was fast, but shallow. You could wade across. And here, on the island, no one from all sides. You can swim, sunbathe, talk about your secrets at the top of your voice. No one but the birds can hear. When the girls had had enough of swimming in the clear, cool water, felt revived again, and laid down on the sand, Katie paused mysteriously and said, "My father bought me an inflatable boat." "How did you talk him into it?" Selena wondered. "I know you wanted it, but Mom told you not to ask for it. I swore that you and I would only swim in the lake." The lake was quite large, curving around the village. It was beautiful, but my friends didn't like it much. Marshy shores, swimming only from bridges, and a wall of forest on one side. Probably, Katie's father assumed that there were always enough fishermen on the lake, and her daughter would not be in trouble here. And if there was trouble, people would help her. But, Katie raised her finger, "What if you and I go on the river on such a trip? As our historian Valandra says, on the native land. For 3 days, as far as Rozdisvinsko, huh? There, downstream, my boat, and back, if we want, we can either the same way or hitchhike home." The big old village, which was relatively close by, was filled with tourists and vacationers in summer. The trip itself was tempting, but Katie hadn't yet revealed all the cards. "I know that there, except for the agricultural technical school and the ruins of the factory and the sites that seem to be everybody goes there, mainly for the beautiful nature. And you and I will go to the Baron's house." "What house?" Selena didn't think she heard. That was the card Katie had up her sleeve. She was talking in a hurry, emotion overflowing. It turned out that once a nobleman from St. Petersburg, the brother of the Empress's favorite, by the way, had acquired an estate here. There was a lot of things here. There was a lord's house, and the manager's outbuilding and stables, and even a small church, and so on and so forth. Almost none of it has survived, except for the bar house, which was obviously built for centuries. The owner himself lived here very little. He stayed more and more in New York and abroad. Maybe he had originally planned to come here for the summer, but only then he forgot about this place, until he decided to get rid of his wife. It is said that he dreamed of hares and married a girl who was not rich, but very beautiful, and who was 2 or even 3 times younger than him. But with hares did not work out. The only son died in infancy. Then the Count made a new girlfriend, and since divorces at that time, to put it mildly, were not very good, he sent his wife here, out of sight. Like, "I'll support you, but you must never appear in my house again." This beautiful woman lived here until her death and died here. And young. She wasn't even 30 years old yet. She was said to have lost her mind in her last years. Yes, there was also a family crypt on the estate. And the unhappy woman made one condition. She would leave and would not remind her husband of herself. Only let her boy's body be reburied in the crypt so she could visit his grave. There's nothing else left for her in this life. And then, whether with the head of the barmaid became disordered, or whether she sincerely believed in different sorcerers, but as if she hoped with their help to revive her son, or just with his soul to communicate. It's like at spiritualistic seances different spirits are summoned. Of course, there are no reliable descriptions. Maybe they are just legends. It's also unknown whether she succeeded or not. The end of Countess Catherine herself was as mysterious as her life. The year of her death in the few documents indicated differently. Presumably she left at the age of between 28 and 30 years. When the manor house was finally abandoned, some of the locals decided to rob the house, and at the same time the crypt, the grave of the Countess, was not there. Today, the surviving house is in complete disrepair, becoming a shelter for various marginalized people. That's why it is not mentioned in any tourist guides, and guides do not take tours there. It's a miracle the mansion is still standing. If the walls weren't so strong, everything would have fallen apart long ago. It's got 2 floors and a mezzanine, Katie continued. The guys from our school wandered in by accident. They say a few people live there. The windows are covered with rags or plastic sheeting, and the beds are rags. But some remnants of former luxury have survived. Some tiles, some stove flaps. The bums are there all year round. Only one night a year they try not to stay in the house. It's the anniversary of the death of the Countess's little son. They say Catherine's ghost appears there at midnight. A lady dressed in white walks through the empty house. Then she goes up to the mezzanine, where these seances were held, and there she disappears, as if she were going into a large mirror. And that's the night that's gonna happen next week. Let's go catch a ghost, huh? Selena blinked a lot. Why do you need it? That was the first thing she asked. Look, it's probably in every old house. The lady in white, the gentleman in black. People can't do without scary stories. There's no one there, I'm sure. Just bombshells. Well, even if you see him, how are you going to catch him, this ghost? And what are you gonna do with it? It's not a genie. You can't put it in a lamp and make it come out and do what you want. But Selena knew her friend too well. If the word interesting lit up in front of Katie with a neon flame, there were no obstacles for her. She forgot everything. She was driven by passion, like Rocky the mouse who saw the cheese in front of him. I don't know. Maybe there's some treasure left there, and the ghost will show it to us, or tell us some terrible secret. It doesn't matter. Just think how great it would be if we could see it. It's otherworldly. Her friend's voice sounded ecstatic. Selena sighed again. There's no use in talking you out of it, I take it. Absolutely. Katie confirmed easily. But you're with me, aren't you? I'm not going to catch a ghost, and I'm not going to make friends with the marginalized. You can go and catch your ghost. I'll wait for you somewhere, not far away. The rest of the evening, the girlfriends were going to spend discussing the details of the trip. They were used to the fact that the island was the most secluded place and belonged only to the two of them. That's why they were both so surprised to see a young man on the shore on the cliff. The boy was older than them. If the girlfriends were 15 years old, he was about 18 or even 20, a respectable age, and he was glad to see them. Girls, I'm lost here. Can you tell me how to get to the village? We're not from around here, Katie mumbled to her friend, and she answered loudly, We'll show you, of course. I just wonder how you got lost here. Wait, don't come down to us. Look around. There should be a path behind you. You'll follow it to the concrete road. Well, it's a road paved with slabs, and along it there will be dry trees on the left, and then on the right there's a long hill. If you watched Teletubbies as a kid, it looks like their house. When you pass the hill, you'll see the roofs in the distance and the water tower. I'll go down after all. The heat is unbelievable. Is it so shallow everywhere here, or is there a place where you can take a dip? There's a pool farther away, Selena told me. She herself, although she had learned to swim, preferred shallow water. The cliff was really steep. The tree that grew on its edge had long roots, and like an uncombed mane of hair, went down to the shore. And clinging to them, intercepting them with his hands, the boy found himself on the shore. Here? He asked, pointing to where the river had overflowed. Here, Kathy confirmed. The boy threw off his clothes and plunged into the cool river with visible pleasure. He swam on his side and on his back, dived. He's showing off in front of us, Katie whispered to Selena. Finally, the boy surfaced near their islet and was sitting next to his girlfriends, large drops of water glistening on his back. He told them that he had come to the neighboring village, to his aunt's house. There were many lakes in the neighborhood, and he was advised to go to one of them, the one in the middle of nowhere. They say that the river used to flow in a different channel, but then it made a small dam on it, and the channel changed. And where it was before, this very lake remains. My name's John, by the way. The nature was really magnificent, and John regretted that he had not brought his camera, but he managed to get lost and barely escaped from the vipers. Snakes obviously considered themselves the mistresses of those eats. And there were 2 no hunting posters. I didn't want to unexpectedly encounter those that were forbidden to hunt, especially if they were large and predatory. John sounded like he was making fun of himself. And then when I finally got out of the thicket, there were fields and no direction to go, just a sea of green all around, and no one to ask. So you guys really helped me out. He even clasped his hand to his chest. Please, answered Katie in the same mocking tone. We provide services, replace the compass, tell the way. We came on acquaintance and in a pool to drown. How are you going to get back? Selena asked worriedly. You'll have to go to the bus stop. At 7 o'clock, the last bus will go. You'll get to your village. For some reason, though John was good looking, she felt uncomfortable and a little afraid in his presence. Katie didn't seem to think anything bad, and back to the village they went together. It turned out that Selena was walking a little away from her friend and John, and they, engrossed in conversation, did not notice it. It turned out that John is already a student studying at the law school. They have a whole dynasty, starting with his grandfather, an old lawyer. This year they were going to go to the sea, but his father was busy at work. He was assigned a case, which he cannot give up. As a consolation to this family, he promised to postpone the vacation to the New Year vacations and together go somewhere in a foreign resort. John thought that he would have to spend the summer in the city, but he loves traveling so much. Visit Aunt Elizabeth, his mother suggested. She'd be pleased. There's fresh air, woods, and a river, all that variety. In a couple of days, John had explored the village thoroughly and was bored. Using satellite maps, he began to find out what else was interesting in the area. These places were famous for lakes, large and small, and swamps. As for sites, there were not many of them in the vicinity, unless the remains of an ancient settlement. But first of all, archaeologists there most likely have already chosen all interesting finds. In the second place, you need to have special knowledge to evaluate what you have found. It's one thing to dig up a treasure, it's clear to everyone, gold and diamonds, and quite another to shed tears of adoration over some clay pottery, just because it belongs to an ancient culture. So John just did not know where else to go. The trip to his aunt in the village did not give him any surprises. "I don't know about that," Katie said. And though she wasn't going to share her plans with anyone but her friend, she couldn't resist. She told her that next week she and Selena were going to solve one of the local mysteries. "Will you take me with you?" John was excited. "You won't fit third in the boat, but we can arrange to meet at the house." The adventure seemed to be even more charming in Katie's eyes when it became clear that they would have such a companion. Selena, on the other hand, felt like giving up on the trip. For the first time, she saw that her friend had completely forgotten about her, not even looking back. The girl began to look for a reason to separate from the company, and at the same time to abandon the trip. You can say that Mom will be worried, and when they returned to the village, Katie decided to escort her new friend to the bus stop. Selena, on the other hand, referred to the fact that she was home for the first day, not even having her things all laid out yet, and said goodbye. But Katie still came running to her place for a sleepover. And the friends, as always, lingered in the garden under the starry sky, and then whispered for a long time in the small room, which in summer became a bedroom. Over the course of a year, they both accumulated a huge amount of news. Katie said the program was getting harder and harder, and her mother was terribly upset when her daughter brought home C's. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Katie said. "Our class is like the movie Dumb and Dumber. We don't even have anyone to copy from. My mom is threatening to hire me a tutor, algebra, geometry, physics. But, I can't get it all in my head. Physics, in my opinion, was invented specifically to make fun of people. Now my mom will pay money and I, instead of living my life, will sit with our Anna, and who else my mom can hire, as Nair saying physicist, nod. Pretend that I understand something. And on the test again, no clue. Still, you are happy." Selena lay on her stomach and seemed to be looking at the pattern on the pillow, running her finger over it. "Every day after school, you come home. It's like I have two lives. At home, one, and when I come to the boarding school in the fall, the other begins." And Selena, not complaining, but just so that her friend could imagine, began to tell about how she had to eat food in the canteen, which she did not like, semolina and pea soup, to eat just not to stay hungry. The kids get bread from the canteen. The older ones get something from their relatives for pocket money. They run to the store to buy buns, something sweet. I try not to ask my mom for money, it's hard for her. I say that we have everything at the boarding school. If I take it, it's only a little for new tights for shampoo. But in general, we can't have anything particularly good, they'll steal it. The drawers are not locked. You can't complain to the teachers. I've learned that from childhood. Everyone despises a bully, and boys are best not to be messed with. They stole a new girl's cell phone. She's 12 years old. She's still young. "Cell phone thing expensive," she cried, then still went and the teacher and told her. Of course, there was a commotion. They made a real search in the bedrooms and found the cell phone under the boys' mattresses. And how can you punish them when even many teachers are afraid of them? Those boys in high school, they just pretend it's okay. They found the phone. Problem solved. But then the boys hounded that poor girl. They ran up to her at recess, pulled up her skirt, and shouted at the whole corridor what color her panties are. Teachers tried to do something, scolded them, gave them a D for behavior, threatened to expel them. They could not do anything. As a result, this girl was taken away by her mother and homeschooled. Listen, why doesn't your mom take you? Katie suddenly asked. Me? Selena was confused. My father told me to finish school there at the boarding school. Kathy whistled. Where is he, that father? I don't think he cares where you are or what's wrong with you. Mom's not disenfranchised. Let her go and file a report and we'll be back in the same class. Selena had a flicker of hope, but she was afraid to give it away. You know what my mom's like. She's so quiet, unresponsive. She can't raise her voice at anyone, can't fight. The principal will say to her, let the girl finish her studies with us, and she won't dare object. You know how I cursed that uncle who stole me. Not for me. He didn't actually do anything to me. All I remember is that I was sitting there watching, well, wait on TV. I'm for my mom. You may not remember, but I do. She used to be a completely different person. My dad used to say about her that she was a holiday woman. Well, we'll talk more about it, Katie said thoughtfully, apparently still thinking about it. They fell asleep when the sky in the east began to lighten up. The days left before the journey began flew by like an arrow. The girls managed to persuade their parents to let them go to Rozdestvensko and back. Selena's mom had the hardest time, but she was persuaded with a chorus. Well, you cannot deprive the girl completely independent, said Jenkins' father. In a few years she's so and so to leave here. She will enter a technical school or an institute. She will start her own life. If you patronize her like this, then she will have 10 times more difficulty. I understand. Ariana agreed with a guilty look, but she was still slow to let go of her daughter's hand. You'd have to drown in our river. A chicken can wade through it. Our daughters can swim. Now they're practicing with the boat on the lake, and the girls really practiced. They swam to the farthest edge of the lake, where seldom anyone wandered. The forest was so dense here. They rubbed their palms with paddles, and Selena, who was used to the sun, managed to get burned. Finally, the tent, sleeping bags, and everything else necessary for the trip were packed. We decided to set off in the morning. In the first place, it was not hot yet, and in the second place, the girlfriends expected to stop for an hour in the afternoon and still swim to Rozdestvensko in the evening. Jenia's mother wanted to call her acquaintance to let the girls spend the night. Her daughter barely managed to talk her out of it. Mom, that's the whole interest. A tent, night, fire, and night at Aunt Lita's in the hall on cots. Of course, the girls didn't mention the real purpose of their trip. Katie had been to the sea with her parents many times before, but when at dawn their boat left the shore and, obeying the oars and the current, rushed forward, the girl thought that she liked this trip much better. The fresh wind chilled her cheeks, and at every turn there was something unknown waiting for her, and no crowded beaches and crowds of vacationers. In the middle of the day, when the sun was already hot enough, the girls chose a place where the pine trees approached the shore. They took out sandwiches and a thermos of iced tea and stretched out blissfully in the shade. Do you think John will come? Katie asked. Who knows? Wouldn't it be better without him? Selena said cautiously. It's such a special feeling to have someone protecting you. I thought you weren't afraid of anything, Selena wondered, and you trust this guy that much. You've only seen him once. I have a knack for people, Katie said flatly, and there's no one to be friends with around here. I'm getting so sick of the neighbors going, Janisha, you've gotten so pretty. Do you have a boy? You'll finish school. You'll get married. Don't drag it out. Yeah, you should see our slackers. The boys in our class have already tormented the teachers. They don't need history, and English will never be useful in their lives. I can see that none of them will go to college. Have you thought about where you want to go? Selena asked. I'm going to go to the theater school. Kathy said it as a joke, but it's known that in every joke. You can do it. Selena was serious. I can't think of anything but going back to my mom. I'm afraid to go far away. What if something happens to her? She has no one but me, and I have no one but her. They reached the place when the sun was already low on the horizon. Selena thought it was necessary to choose a suitable place on the shore and put up the tent. Day X was coming tomorrow. They would have plenty of time in the morning to tour the Barr's house and make arrangements to stay there overnight. Katie, on the other hand, thought they should go to the old mansion right now. What are we going to do for a couple more hours on the beach to feed the mosquitoes? We got the map. Come on, we'll be there before dark. I want to see how this house looks at dusk. Atmospheric. Go on, Selena agreed. I'll stay here. You can't leave your stuff behind anyway. And the boat. Let's set up the tent and go. I'll get dinner started. Katie didn't want to admit to herself that it wasn't just her desire to see the old house in the sunset light that was driving her. She hadn't exchanged phone numbers with John, nor had they agreed on a specific place to meet, but had limited themselves to a vague meet at the mansion. The chance of meeting a new acquaintance right here and now was slim, but Kathy pretended she wasn't going for that. The old Baron's house stood a little away from the village. For a long time, it had been occupied by an agricultural college, so there was no hope that any of the old things inside had survived, except for the things that couldn't be taken out, like the moldings on the ceiling, and the mezzanine was rumored to have been used as a storage area for junk long ago. The house was a sad sight. Most of the windows were broken, the main entrance was boarded up, the stairs were scratched, and yet there was some life here. There, a figure flashed through the window. Voices were heard. Someone coughed softly behind Katie's back, and she turned around. A man of indeterminate age, with a puffy face and a purple tint, approached unnoticed. Apparently, he had a decent drinking record. Despite the fact that the heat was still on, he was wearing a warm jacket that smelled stale from a distance. "Are you interested in old times?" he asked. "Sort of," Katie answered cautiously. On the one hand, she was afraid to talk to a stranger here when people were far away. On the other hand, she and Selena would want to sneak into the house tomorrow, which meant she'd have to make contact with just such individuals. "Almost no one comes here now," said the man before, when the technical school was here. The house still looked good. And now what? Just ruins. The roof is about to collapse. "Have you been inside?" I lived there," said the new acquaintance with a touch of pride. When the technical school moved, of course, they wanted to tear everything apart. Well, it's like the houses are being dismantled. Somebody wanted frames, somebody wanted doors, somebody wanted floorboards. Well, I guess me and the kids didn't let them. The kids? Katie was confused. "Well, there's a few of us around here. Aborigines, so to speak. It's all right, we've settled in. In winter, we warm ourselves with the stove. We can live. But if you want to see the house, you chose a bad time." "Why?" the girl asked cautiously. "You can't see much now. It's getting dark. And tomorrow..." He hesitated. "Tomorrow what?" "It won't be a good day," the man decided. "It's peaceful here. Except for this day. Sometimes it goes by unnoticed. Nothing happens. And sometimes, I can't find a word for it. A fog. An obsession. You can see something here. It's a strange story. I'll tell you if you want." "Are you staying in the village? Shall I show you out?" "A lady has a chaperone," came a voice that Katie recognized immediately. And immediately the fear vanished. Now Katie was ready to go to the very attic where, according to rumors, the antique mirror had stood before, or even still stood. But she knew they wouldn't see anything now. If anything was going to happen, it would be tomorrow. They were shown into the attic by a familiar marginalized man. Before that, he introduced himself with honor. His name was Victor, but the kids called him Babai. Babai behaved so friendly, as if he was the owner of the manor, and they had come to visit him. Following him, the girls and John went up to the second floor and passed through a long corridor. Everyone looked around curiously. Here, where they passed, the traces of antiquity had almost disappeared. What remained was the interior of the era of the technical school to which the building had belonged for 3 decades. The corridor was once painted with blue paint. Some rooms had lost their doors, and then the boys saw a stove in an empty room, the remains of a sofa, or piles of junk. And then Babai opened an inconspicuous door at the end and said, "Please." It was obvious that he was trying to impress the girls. There was another staircase that led upstairs, narrow, with steep steps. Selena remembered climbing up to the church bell tower with the other kids to ring the bell on Easter when she was a child. There were similar steps on the bell tower, and the next day the girls' legs were very sore. Now there's no way I'll believe that the Countess had ever climbed up here in her lifetime, Katie grumbled. You'd have to try to climb that steepness in a long dress and a half. There was only one room in the attic, a very small one. Maybe no one had ever lived in it. But Selena imagined that the Countess had a study here. Here, by the window, was a mahogany desk covered with green cloth. And this lady wrote bitter letters to her unfaithful husband, from time to time stopping, biting the tip of the pen to gather her thoughts, and looking out the window. The view from here was really wonderful. The house was nestled on a small hill. The forest, the river, and the village were all in sight. Is this the mirror you were talking about? John asked. How did he see it? In the corner of the room, littered with broken frames and some dilapidated furniture, stood a tall mirror, larger than a man, in a simple wooden frame. One might have been tempted to take it away, but the mirror's surface was dull, and it was difficult to see one's reflection even in the most general way. Exactly, Katie said. Oh no. There just can't be any other here. It needs to be vacated. Is it realistic to move all this furniture? Hey, wait a minute, said Babai. This stuff wasn't just piled up here by accident. It used to hang on the wall, that mirror. But this one, maybe it's not just for a reason. What do you mean? Well, it's not just glass. It's like a passage. It's how she comes in and out. John sniffed behind Babai's back and then flicked himself on the neck, letting the girls know that the marginalized man had had his fill of the morning. It's okay, Katie said to Babai. We might just want to socialize. Babai was dumbfounded. With a ghost? Him? Their interlocutor just shook his head. Then he said he couldn't help the guys anymore, let them sort it out themselves, and went to the door. Will you be staying in the house tonight? Katie called after him. I was called to the village, for an ear, that is, and a bath. Babai said it without turning around, but Katie thought he blushed, because he realized he was leaving the house for another reason. Left alone, the boys prepared to wait. They cleared a place in the corner and laid down the old blanket Katie had thoughtfully brought with her. Everyone was excited, so they didn't even think about food. But the bottle of lemonade was quickly emptied. It wasn't as hot here in the attic as it was outside. The walls of the house not only shielded them from the heat, they even felt damp. There was still time before the sun went down. At first, John entertained the girls with stories about traveling. He had traveled a lot of places, both with his parents and alone. At the same time, the guy did not boast about what he had seen, did not describe foreign purchases, and recalled more and more amusing cases, and did not hesitate to mention how he got into trouble. But more often he shared what delighted or disappointed him. Then the conversation quietly turned to various abnormal things. And that's where John became more skeptical than the girls, but an unusual skeptic. It was felt that he himself very much wants to be sure of the existence of miracles. He is looking for it, but if you dig deeper, everything is rational explanations. Next to the city, on the other side of you, there's a national park. And there, in its deepest place, right in the center of the bow, a forest cordon. Well, it's clear there are specialists there watching the animals, all that kind of stuff. The forester lives there all the time, and the national park employees come and go. So there every summer those weirdos who on various anomalies moved, straight pilgrimages, arranged pilgrimages, and their clocks stop there and people lose the idea of time. And mosquitoes are especially angry. The mistress of these places put them to guard the road and not let anyone in. Some see green lights at night. Some see luminous pillars. Some go to one place and come out in another, especially if they have taken a good braceful before, like our Babai. Katie couldn't take it anymore and giggled. Selena, how do you feel about it? John asked, seemingly just to draw the girl into the conversation. Selena shrugged. I believe in prophetic dreams. I've seen a couple times in my life myself. Nothing significant. There's not much to tell. It's just that first it was a dream, and then it happened in real life. It seems to me that those who died, they can only come in dreams, because we call them, miss them, and thus lure them. And the fact that we're waiting for the Countess now, we're baiting her soul. John laughed when Celine shook her head, you little girl. And he touched the tip of her nose with his finger. That's what you do to babies. And then you say, beep. The moon is coming up, said Katie. Let's sit quietly for a while in case something happens. They stood still and waited. Now all three of them were getting a little uneasy. The room, which they had grown kind of used to in the hours they had spent here, now seemed not quite real to them, ghostly. The moonlight drew a path on the floor, which was occasionally crossed by the shadows of the branches outside the window, swaying in the breeze. They were silent, but the longer the time dragged on, the more it seemed to them that they had been silent for ages. And now the ghost would appear at the door. John said in a quiet, but deliberately scary voice. Selena wrapped her arms around herself. Even though she was sitting in the middle, between John and Katie, she didn't feel safe. Unless you closed your eyes and imagined it was all a dream, and in reality you are in your room, or, in the extreme case, in the boarding school bedroom. Katie, the most impatient of them all, had the hardest time. Maybe it's just an idea that this is where the ghost comes from. It's coming out of the attic. We're sitting here like fools, waiting, and he's wandering around the house, glimpsing here and there. Maybe he's searching the house. They'll think you're a ghost, John suggested. Your blouse is light-colored. If any of the homeless people are still there, they'll scream, especially if you step on them. What if, Selena started but didn't dare to continue. Of course, this thought was naive, and she shouldn't have shared it with her friends. Still, she couldn't resist checking it out. She got up, walked silently over to the mirror, which glowed faintly in the darkness, and brought her face close to it. She always liked to look at stereo pictures. You look through the patterns, then as if you were pulling your gaze into your own dimension. But slowly, and then suddenly a three-dimensional figure suddenly appeared. A swimming fish, a running man, something else. Selena looked through the mirror, into nowhere, into eternity, or maybe into the very essence of herself, and then tried to come back. And then it was as if it burst from inside. Only for her, for Selena. Visible, such bright, such big blue eyes, which seemed to belong to a man, looked straight at her. It looked, burned with their certainty. It could not seem it was a look from there, from the beyond. Celine shrieked, but it was a squeeze, and everything went black. She was lying on the grass, and Katie was gently touching her face with something cold and wet. Selena had never heard her friend's voice so frightened before. Nothing. Her own voice sounded so quiet that Selena thought no one would hear. Where are we? In the clearing by the house, Katie said hurriedly. John carried you out in his arms. You saw something, didn't you? Don't question her, the boy hastily intervened. Let her come to her senses first. Celine felt so weak that she wanted only to close her eyes and not move, but she knew that would frighten her friends even more. So after a few minutes, she sat up. She had to put her hand on the ground, though. Are we staying here? Katie looked at John. She won't be able to walk, will she? Wait, I'll be right back. I'll be back in a little bit and then we'll go, Selena promised. They made their way to the tent on the beach. Selena was leaning on John's arm, and Katie was ready to pick her up on the other side. The girl knew that her friends, though they had decided not to ask her, were still burning with curiosity. They would want to know what she had seen. Celine felt better as they approached the shore. Let's not talk about it, okay? She said. I just can't tell you. I don't know what words to use. But it's there, or something is there, but it's there. Katie must have been offended. It was the first time Selena had ever kept a secret from her. And it's a big one. But in all fairness, Katie was the one who made it all up, and she should have seen what Selena did. However, the friend looked bad. It was clear that Alinka was not pretending there, white as a wall, and Katie, with great difficulty for herself, but decided really not to question her about anything. The next morning, everyone pretended that there had been no ghost hunt. So what if they went to Rozdesvinsko? It was only a short drive from home. John arranged with some of the locals, and they were driven back by car. In the light of day, what had happened the day before seemed equally unreal to both John and Katie. Selena was silent, and it was impossible to know what she was thinking. From that day on, she remained strangely silent, thinking bitterly that she must have inherited her mother's psyche. Once a major upheaval had happened in her life, she had gone. Selena no longer agreed to any of Zhenka's projects, and all immersed in housework. Good, it was enough. Selena tended the vegetable garden. On some days she helped her mother on the farm, on others she cleaned and cooked. But in the evenings, Ariana was reluctant to send her daughter out for a walk with Katie. Often John joined their company. He had gotten a bicycle, and now he had no trouble getting to his girlfriend's house. The girls showed him all the protected corners, all the places in the neighborhood that they loved so much. It was always easy for the three of them. They never quarreled, and Katie confided at home that she was already waiting for the next day to come and they would meet again and go out together. "You're in love, I guess," Mom suggested. Katie just shrugged her shoulders. She told John Selena's story, taking the boy at his word not to do anything without consulting her. "But it's so easy to decide." John was agitated. "I could talk at the boarding school myself, but it's better. Father's coming to pick me up in mid-August to stay here for a few days. Aunt Elizabeth is his sister. They don't see each other much. We'll all go to the boarding school together and solve this issue. We'll knock the principal on the head. Don't be frightened, I'm speaking figuratively." And it all worked out. Selena didn't believe it at first. John's father, a very serious, imposing middle-aged man, a lawyer of a large company, just started talking as the principal, who Selena was so afraid of, immediately began to nod and agree to everything. Of course, I understand. The girl will be better at home." All that was left to do was sign the papers, pick up the documents, and bow out. Jack's father was in the car, so they took Selena's things at once. The girl looked at her empty bed and nightstand and thought that it was as if she had never lived here. Ariana was happy to the point of tears and felt guilty that she hadn't had the courage to take her daughter earlier. The girlfriends now went to high school together. In the few years that passed before graduation, their friendship with John had not been interrupted. While the guy studied at the institute, he regularly came for summer and winter vacations, and together they had fun like children. They even went down the slide, and Katie laughed so hard that it was hard to stop her. John was equally attentive to both girls, but Selena knew in her heart that she was going to give in to Katie. Her friend was falling more and more in love. Selena had her own secret, which she did not share with anyone but her mother. "Mom," she asked Ariana, "did we have any fortune tellers in our family?" Her mother had been sewing, and now she put the unfinished work on her lap. "Not that I know of," she said, thinking, "Why? You know I'm even afraid to talk about it. I see bad things sometimes now. Well, like if a person is going to die soon, I see through his real face another one, waxen dead, and the eyes are closed. It's like the pictures are superimposed on each other. I've lost my mind and now I'll be locked up not in a boarding school, but in a hospital, right? In an asylum?" The last spring the girls spent at school came. Katie was ready to surrender to the inscrutability of the exact sciences. "I'll only take basic math," she said angrily. "A fool can figure it out. I'll never need those discriminants and other nonsense anyway." She was going to theater school. No, not in some university known throughout the country, and in the studio at the Regional Drama Theater. As for appearance, Katie did not meet the expectations they used to put on her parents. Now it was clear that grew a gray sparrow. Average height, stubby, until she began to talk, remained unremarkable, but Katie rarely spoke. "What a common appearance. What's the big deal?" She snorted. Not gray, but universal. "I can be made up to look like anyone. And then I'm not going to the movies or close-ups. Who's going to get a close-up look at me from the auditorium, except through binoculars?" She didn't seem to have any doubts that she'd get in. Selena, on the other hand, was quietly sad. Not only her best friend, but all her classmates were discussing where they would apply after graduation. They were trying to get caught up, if not in a technical school, then at least in some courses. Nobody was going to stay in the village. Selena had nothing else to do. Her mom was giving up more and more than once she woke her daughter up in the middle of the night. "Sit with me for a while. I don't feel well." Selena measured her mother's blood pressure, put medicine in a shot glass, took pills out of the medicine cabinet. She was desperate for mom to keep working. Her mother rested as long as she could and hurried back to her animals. As soon as Selena had a spare moment, she would rush to help, but mom couldn't find any other work. There was just no work. Besides, the food that appeared on their table was also from the farm, a great help. So Selena knew that she couldn't go anywhere after school, at least not yet. And if her mother talked to her about her future plans, the girl only joked about it. Katie, obeying an innate sense of contradiction, on the graduation party came in a pantsuit. Selena helped Selena help the neighbor. She kept a beautiful dressed daughter, which she also wore to the graduation. So what if the outfit is a little outdated? Youth supplemented the missing and Selena looked adorable. A few days later, she was seeing her friend off. Parents rented an apartment near the theater for their only daughter, so that the girl had all the conditions to prepare for the exams. If she gets in, she'll live there from now on. And you'll come and visit me, Kathy, stingy with tenderness. Hut Selena. You're so sure you'll get in? You bet, I know where I belong. And Katie did get in. She rarely called Selena. Both girls were busy, as they say, over the top, and in the evenings they could barely make it to bed. But God knows how Katie's life was going. Selena, on the other hand, was up bright and early. A sweatshirt, rubber boots, manure, feed, and 1,000 things you can't avoid if you work with animals. The farmer was very pleased. Selena turned out to be an industrious and skillful worker, and financially the small family's life became a little easier. Autumn brought with it a dreariness, especially when November took over. The nature around looked quite bleak. Slush, cold, and long dark evenings. And if Celine hadn't been blessed with a rich imagination, she would have been sad. And she also fell in love with goats, noticing that each one had its own special character. The girl recognized the pets even by their voices, and when she came to the farm in the morning, the horned pets greeted her joyfully. Her mother, though she was not feeling well, did not want to retire. "I will not sit on your neck," she told her daughter. "I have a long way to go before retirement. I'll leave at least milking for myself. Still, it's not Hans the machine." That talent of Selena, which awoke after the adventures in the old house, developed more and more. Sometimes she herself did not notice that when she met with acquaintances, and in the village practically everyone knew each other, she threw some phrases that were surprisingly accurate in predicting the future. A neighbor would complain that she couldn't sell her house, and Selena would casually say, "You don't have to sell it. It's gonna take everyone in." And it turns out in a short time that the neighbor's daughter divorces her husband, takes the children, and comes to her mother. Another woman will share that her back hurts, she can't stand it anymore, and she would hear Selena's advice to go to church on Sunday. She did not want to go. The woman had long ago stopped attending church and did not hope for help from above. But at the service, she unexpectedly met an old acquaintance with her daughter, and the daughter turned out to be a doctor working in the city in the hospital. She called the patient to come and promised to help. Selena's gift was first noticed by her fellow villagers, and more often began to turn to her for advice. The girl herself was terribly embarrassed and was ready to deny everything. How could she know what would happen next? It just seemed so to her, and she does not claim any truth in the last instance. Her mother insisted that on New Year's vacation, the girl went to the city to a friend. "Substitute you. Nothing will happen to me," she persuaded. "If you do not agree, then make me worse. I'll think I'm eating up your life." "Mom, what are you saying?" "Live a young girl's life for a while. Go to the movies with Katie. Go shopping. Here, I put some money aside for you." Selena wanted to say bitterly that she wouldn't need the good stuff. Not to go to the cattle, perfumed with French perfume or waving an expensive purse. But she kept silent, realizing that she would upset her mother even more. Still, she gave in to her entreaties and bought a bus ticket. Katie met her at the station, unrecognizable. It was a warm winter, and her friend was wearing a light coat and a cap of unimaginable style. Katie had never worn high-heeled boots before, but they were terribly happy to see each other, and they were hugging each other. "I could hardly get away," said Katie. "You're the ones who have days off on New Year's Eve, but we're busy. We, the students, put on a play based on fairy tales, and now we're on stage every night. Kids, holidays, Christmas trees." Her friend's apartment struck Selena, seemed luxurious. How easy it must be to live like this. To make toast in the morning, take out of the refrigerator yogurt, brew coffee in an elegant turbine, and in the evening to lie in a shining bath, and then settle down in this cozy chair with a book in his hands. There's such a thing in the world. Katie took her friend to rehearsal and then to the play. And although Selena was far from all this theater life, she felt that the main wealth for Kathy, here on this stage. To Selena's surprise, her friend played the steadfast tin soldier, but she was only surprised for the first minute, and then she was completely mesmerized by the tale. It's really yours, she said to her friend after the performance. I had tears in my eyes. Katie wrinkled her nose. We were afraid. The holidays, the kids. You need a fun story, and we've taken on such lyrics. But that's okay. Even kids need to know the ins and outs of life. And in the end, Soldier Boy and Dancer, though burned in the flames, stayed together. Is it so bad to be burned by love? Then she looked at Selena with a sidelong glance and added, tomorrow is my day off after all. I'll get John to drive us around the city. I was afraid to ask you about him. I thought you were together, and you still haven't said a word about him. You two haven't had a fight. Not once. You're here from morning till night. You don't realize the rhythm of life here. Then you realize, oh, we haven't seen each other for a month. Later, Selena couldn't forget that day. John had picked up the girls in the morning. They were in a country park, admiring the snowy winter, drinking mulled wine in a small cafe. Then Kathy and John organized a real excursion for Selena, showed her the city in a way that no tour guide could do. And here I bought my pearl earrings in this store, Katie said. It was the first cold day of autumn. I was going to buy my shoes for this season. I looked in the jewelry store only for a minute, saw these earrings and couldn't resist. And here, girls, you can go up on the roof of an old house and look down on the city. Would you like that? John suggested it. In the evening, they sat late at Katie's house, drinking coffee, and Selena listened avidly to her friends' stories about what had happened to them over the months. She had nothing to tell them herself. Well, she got stronger a little. Sacks of mixed fodder alone carries from the gate to the barn. Well, her favorite goat gave birth to 4 baby goats. Are they interested in that? Then it turned out that John thought Selena had come for the whole New Year's holiday, but she was only off for 3 days, so they didn't really get to say goodbye. The next morning, when the guy called Katie and asked where they wanted to go today, it turned out that Selena was on the first flight out, and Katie had a rehearsal. It was a damn shame, and the guy was upset. Why didn't you tell me? I would have walked her to the train station. I thought you knew, Katie said. The next time the friends might not see each other until summer at the earliest, but already in the spring Selena started having strange dreams, or rather, the same dream that repeated itself from night to night. She was in Rozdestvensko again, and she was walking along the riverbank. The banks here were sandy. Year after year, the river washed up the slopes, changing their relief. And now the edge of an old, abandoned cemetery was exposed, where no one had been buried for a long time. In her dreams, Celine walked along this shore, agonizingly trying to figure out what she needed to find. What was it? But the morning came when she woke up, knowing exactly what she had to do. In Rozdestvensko, there was a small museum, which for a long time could not think of a name. And finally, they christened it the Museum of Peasant Life. Here was collected that told about the life of peasants in the past centuries. Troughs and spinning wheels, tools, cradles for babies, embroidery, icons. And of course, the only woman who worked here, both as director and tour guide, knew the history of the old manor. Celine went to her. Maria, she said, what will be done with the old cemetery? Her companion understood her half-wordedly. Our priest has long said that the remains should be collected and buried in the new cemetery, albeit in a common mass grave, buried and honored. It is necessary. Celine did not take her serious gaze away from her. I know why no crypt was found in the manor. But how? Maria even took off her spectacles, as if she thought she could see the girl better that way. There are no documents, nothing. Countess Catherine longed for her dead son and really tried to communicate with his soul in some way. Maybe it developed some natural ability she had. Today, she would be called clairvoyant. Back then, the peasants called her a witch. She did die young. She was poisoned. Her husband had long since forgotten to think of her, and she was buried here, in an unmarked grave outside the cemetery. And the remains of her son, the witch's beast, were moved there, and the crypt was leveled. Is that a legend? Did one of the locals tell you? Selena shook her head. It's true. There's still an oak tree there, and next to it is that grave. We have to do something. It took a while to get the old cemetery moved, but Maria still managed to convince the authorities. She found arguments. Summer is approaching, the warm season. Both summer residents and tourists will come to Rozdestvensko, and the beach can't be open like this. Who will like the neighborhood with crumbling earth and remains of burials? The work took about a month, and when it was finished, Selena felt an unprecedented peace of mind. She knew that Maria had finally believed her. The workers had found the grave of a woman and a child by the oak tree. Selena had no doubt who it was. If only the old manor could be restored, but that was no longer in her power. And at the beginning of the summer, quite unexpectedly, a matchmaker came to Selena. At first, she and her mother didn't even understand what was wrong. This woman, Naomi, they knew well, but this time she was accompanied by two men. "I found you a bridegroom," Naomi said. "Almost from the doorstep, a bridegroom like you'll envy yourself. But I'm not getting married." Selena didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. "Listen to me. He's got his own company that makes these bags. He's got everything. You should see the house. It's a palace. The only thing is," Naomi hesitated, "he's in his 70s. But that's nothing." "Nonsense. I told him about you. I praised you. You're smart and beautiful, and you have a gift from God. You can see the future. So I brought you good news." Selena turned to her mother, hoping that she would help her out of her ridiculous situation, and froze. On her mother's face, she saw a familiar death mask. "Cardiogram, a nightmare," trustingly shared with Selena, girl therapist. She was small, overweight, a kind of kolobok. "Why, you, woman, so many health problems, and even at the dispensary has not been once." I wasn't complaining. No, Ariana hasn't changed a bit. As soon as they raised their voices at her or began to reproach her for something, she immediately began to make frightened excuses. I wasn't complaining. In any case, you need to come to the clinic at least a couple times a year. I had such patients. They say that everything is fine, but look at the cardiogram, and there are flags. The therapist sighed. "Well, in the hospital we'll be registered." "No," Ariana was scared again. "We will," Selena said firmly. "Mom, I don't know how they'll treat you there, but in any case, you won't go off to milking or weeding. I know you. You will be examined in peace," supported her therapist. "Injections, procedures. You need treatment for a long time, as you do not understand it. In short, I write a referral, and tomorrow morning you come, with a robe, slippers, toiletries." At home, Ariana cried all the time. She hadn't been in a hospital since she was a child. "Don't put me there. I won't come back," she kept repeating. Selena silently gathered her mother's things. Speaking was difficult for her, her throat constricted. So far, no one she had seen the seal on had escaped their fate. Would she be able to save her mom? She would do anything for that. The farmer for whom Ariana had worked for so many years showed sympathy the next morning by driving them to the hospital in his car. Otherwise, they would have had to take a crowded bus. A few days passed in anxiety, doubt, uncertainty. Selena struggled to find time to visit her mother every day. Then the attending physician invited her to visit her. "You realize that the district hospital doesn't have a lot of resources," she said, "and there's not much we can do for your mother. But I don't know how long that'll last. Some kind of stress, hypertension, whatever, and the end could be anything, including the saddest, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done." Selena was desperate. "Your mom needs to go to a full-fledged cardiology, to the regional hospital at least. But I don't know if the head of the department will give a referral. How can I put this delicately? She's weird. She always thinks we can do it on our own. I'm sorry to be so blunt. A lot of doctors have left here. I remember one patient. They told him he needed this amount of money so we could really help you. Sell the garage, we'll cure you. And he took pity on the garage, decided to raise a pig, then sell the meat, get the money he needed. Lost a year, died. Perhaps we should complain. I want someone who is stubborn and persistent to see it through to the end. Unfortunately, not everyone has time to wait until the complaint is considered, until the measures are taken. And what kind of measures will these measures be? In many ways, our superiors have everything in hand. The most harmless in this regard is our old therapist. People come to him to call him home to a sick person. He says, "If you pour me a drink, I'll come in." In short, I realize that we can't do without money, without a decent sum. That's life. The doctor said sadly, "In any case, if you have a seriously ill patient at home, you will need money. Whether you will seek a referral or want to pay for treatment, Still, without spending will not do without spending. All the way home, Selena rubbed her forehead with the palm of her hand. She and her mom tried to save money for a rainy day, but it was ridiculous to even talk about the amount they had saved. Should I try to borrow money from someone? But how would they pay it back? Selena knew how much she could earn even if she tried her best. Going into a lot of debt was unrealistic. What else? Sell the house? That would be enough money for a short-term cure. But Selena knew how many houses in the village had "for sale" written on the gate or on the fence. No one was in a hurry to buy. Arriving at the empty house, she texted Katie, outlining the situation in a nutshell. "Don't tell John," she asked. "The young man is a real gentleman, as they used to say. He will try to help in some way, but Selena and her mother are strangers to him, and there is nothing to involve a good man in this hard story." And in the morning, exhausted from doubts and fighting with herself, Selena called the very Valentina who wanted to be a matchmaker. "This old man of yours who wants to marry me, will he give money for my mom's treatment? If he does, I'll marry him now." Isn't that what they called an unequal marriage in the old days? Selena stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the folds of her wedding dress. The last few weeks had been so hard on her that she didn't know if she could take it. Naomi had been terribly happy when she called. She said that she would find out everything and call back, but she was more than sure that the groom would not refuse. And when the call came a few hours later, the matchmaker's voice was more than triumphant. It turns out that the old man cannot just give money. He knows well the head of the cardiology department in the regional hospital. "You could say friends. You won't cheat me?" Selena asked. Everything was hanging by a thread for her now, and there was nothing left but to believe these strangers. At the very least, they would just use her like a thing. But for now, there was hope. The gift that she had so unexpectedly received and that had never let her down all this time was suddenly gone. Selena could no longer see the beyond, could no longer see into the future. She still visited her mother every day, but she never mentioned her wedding to her. If my mom heard about the 70-year-old groom, it would kill her. She'd have to find out about the whole thing when the treatment was over. The only thing that worried her was that the fiancé was in no hurry to see her. "He saw you," Naomi said meaningfully, "and he liked you a lot. He's still a very busy man. Every minute counts. He's coming straight to the registry office." Selena's just a wreck. In her heart, she'd hoped that she would have time not only to get acquainted with her future husband, but also to become attached to him. She would try her best to find good traits in him. Having lived all her life in the village, the girl had seen an example of such a marriage. Rich by local standards, not an old man, he had northern shares and an apartment in the city, which he rented, and an excellent 2-story house above the lake, married a young woman with 2 children. In the village about this, Katya went not too good fame, and she is self-serving and ready to go with the first man if it will bring her some benefit. And this marriage did not end well. Katya's husband raised and educated foster children. To provide the family with everything that Katya wanted, he gradually sold in shares and his other property. City apartments signed over to his stepdaughters, the house bequeathed to his young wife, not his children from his first marriage. "Is it a sorceress, this Catherine?" whispered fellow villagers. "Why did she take him? After all, as they say, neither skin nor skin." And the old man was completely out of his mind with her. Well, maybe when he'll die, the young wife will take care of him. At least she'll do her duty. In the end, the old man took his own life. No one knew for sure what caused it. Catherine grieved for show, with sobs and lamentations, but quickly after that became a laughing young widow, quite satisfied with life. "I would not be like that," thought Selena. "If this man had helped my mother and treated me well, I would have done everything for him. And if he got sick, I'd take care of him, even if it was for years. And I would never cheat on him." But the fact that the groom did not even bother to get acquainted with her, it emphasized that Selena is just bought, and it is unlikely that in this marriage she is waiting for something good. Naomi took the girl's measurements and brought her a wedding dress from the city, sewn in an expensive salon. "And the rings will be at the groom's," she said. "In the morning we take you out of the house, take you to the city. There you will sign. If you want to take something from the things, collect in advance. I'll take to the place where you will live." Selena hurried to say it was important for her. There would be no guests from her side. And of course, no traditional redemption or other wedding entertainment. The car would arrive, the bride would get out, and that was all. The girl did not leave the thought that she was doing something unimaginable wrong. If it was not so, of course, she would have called Jenka, and her mother would be sitting at the wedding table next to her. Now she's doing everything furtively, definitely running away. "What's my way out?" yelled Selena to herself. There were no options, so she would have to pull herself together and never show what was on her mind. For some reason, the hardest thing to deal with was the thought that John would find out soon enough. He would realize at once that she had sold herself, and of course he would never want to do business with her again. The night before the wedding, Selena had not slept, and in the morning she was exhausted. She styled her own hair, and suddenly the hairdryer electrocuted her. Everything in the old house was slowly breaking down. She and her mom had been planning to change the wiring for a long time. This electric shock, not so strong, but nevertheless it was the last straw. Selena sat with her hands over her face, crying and unable to stop. With only an hour to go before the agreed-upon time, she rushed to clean herself up. She tucked her lush hair into a heavy knot, put on a little makeup with her cheap cosmetics, and then, without help, put on a lush wedding dress decorated with pearls. I involuntarily remembered Jenka. She was very fond of pearls, and from these memories tears came to her eyes again. At last a car drove up to the house, black, shining, the like of which had probably never been seen on their village street. Naomi went into the house and took a quick look at the girl. She was good. "Why are you so pale?" "I'll give you some cognac." "I'll give you some cognac. It's angelic tears, not booze." She took out a full bottle of expensive cognac from somewhere in her bag. Apparently she herself had tasted it many times in the morning. She looked for a shot glass, didn't find one, poured the cognac directly into a cup. "Have a drink." And Selena, who had never drunk hard liquor in her life, drank it all with her eyes squeezed shut. Perhaps it was a gesture of desperation. "Everything will be all right," the matchmaker said encouragingly. The car had a soft ride. It was definitely flying over the road. Selena watched the familiar villages flash by the window. Here was the district center, where her mother was lying in the hospital. Selena had warned her the day before that she wouldn't come tomorrow, but she would have to call her, just to get a moment. The girl clutched the phone as tightly as if it were her only link to her old life. In the city, they drove up to a small registry office on the outskirts, and Selena wondered why here. If the groom was a rich and powerful man, one could assume that they would be waiting for some pompous ceremony in the palace of marriage. "Our groom doesn't like too much fuss," Naomi said. "They'll sign you, then you'll take pictures, and then you'll go to a restaurant. He's rented a whole country estate. You'll spend the night there, and tomorrow you'll celebrate the second day as you should." Selena only nodded. She had long ago told herself that she would not oppose the groom in any way. She had one condition, and she'd hoped he would fulfill it. And the rest was unimportant. They stood in the lobby in a small group. Only Naomi was cheerful, making jokes now and then. The two young men seemed to be waiting for something, most likely a chance to sit down at a well-set table and have a drink. And when an older man approached Selena, she realized that he was her future husband. His hair was already quite gray, his mustache and beard neatly trimmed. He shook her hand and smiled affectionately. The whole wedding ceremony was like a dream. They were signed without unnecessary pomp, said a few high-minded words about the birth of a new family. Selena hid her face in the bouquet of roses that the groom presented to her and tried to hold back her tears. Thank God, they were not forced to dance the first marital waltz, and when the new husband was offered to kiss his wife, apparently feeling something, the old man only delicately pecked Selena on the cheek. Then they were taken to a country restaurant. It was one of the best places in town. The old house now served as a hotel, and here they celebrated holidays. There were many secluded nooks and crannies: hunting lodge, Japanese gazebo, English garden. So any, the largest company, could be divided into groups, and guests could spend time with those with whom they wanted. There were already considerably more guests here. Strangers came up to Selena, hugging her, smiling, telling her how lucky she was and how lucky her husband was. She only nodded, but her pallor and extinguished look was conspicuous. Sneaking out onto the balcony, she called her mother, and she said that the head of the department came to her today, was unusually kind, and promised that one day she would send her mother to the regional hospital. Such people had taken care of you, she said. After this conversation, Selena changed, so it had not all been in vain. Her fiancé, no, her husband, keeps his word, and she would try to thank him to do her best. The girl's back straightened, her chin was lifted up, and a gleam appeared in her eyes. The groom seemed to look at her surprised. But all things come to an end, and the moment came when the young ones were taken to the luxurious wedding suite. Selena remembered that there even seemed to be a picture like this. The bride pressed her hand to her forehead, as if emphasizing her despair, and in the bedroom door stands an impatient elderly groom. No, she herself would not cry again. And the girl took up the zipper of the heavy wedding dress. "You wait to undress," said the husband. Selena looked at him with bewilderment. "Do one, do two, do three?" A gray wig, mustache, and beard lay on the dressing table, and Kathy was already wiping makeup off her face. "You really didn't guess?" she asked with genuine interest. Selena realized that it wasn't her mother, but herself, who was about to have a heart attack. She just opened her mouth. How? How? She could only say it a few moments later. "You're such a clumsy motherfucker." Katie sat down beside her. "Oh, that paint, it's going to take 2 hours to wash my face off. You think we didn't find out? You don't think they'd be all over the place in my village? You're a naive daisy. I knew all about your mother and your adventure, and I couldn't leave it like that. But the registry office, how did they manage to pull it off? So what? So it's a bummer for my mom. No one to help her. Who the hell did I marry?" "Calm down," Katie got serious. Hey, you just don't take a swing at me. Mom's gonna be fine. She's actually being transferred here to the med center tomorrow. She's already shown all the transcripts to the doctors. They'll do the surgery, and it'll be like our gym teacher said, chicky chicky. And you got married. Well, I got you drunk on cognac, well done. I thought you wouldn't take it. You married John, my dear. Didn't you listen when the lady at the registry office read the names? I just realized my husband's name was John, and I thought, what a coincidence. And his father is friends with the head of cardiology, so no cheating on the most important thing. And we talked the registry office into it for a fee. Katie, I know who's behind this whole scheme. I'm gonna kick your ass. Hey, crazy horse, don't swing that pillow around. I know you pulled and pull otherwise. Oh, John, I can't marry you. My mom's sick. It's my moral obligation to carry feed to the pigs and clean the stable. I should have had you married right away. You can get a divorce if you want, though. We didn't take you prisoner after all. Selena threw away the pillow she'd been trying to smother her friend with, sat red-faced, disheveled, and blew her hair off her forehead. Anyway, I'm calling John, okay? You can take your clothes off or not. It's up to you. I'm gonna go get the champagne. My friends, if you'll notice, I haven't eaten a thing today because I'm nervous, so I'm hungry and sober, which is a dangerous combination. If anyone had looked into the wedding suite that night, they would have seen the marvelous combination of 3 friends asleep on the king's bed without undressing, and smiles wandered across the faces of all 3. Selena's mother spent 2 months in the hospital. She did have the necessary surgery, but the doctor's prognosis was most optimistic. Of course, it was out of the question for the woman to return to her former job. But in the Regional Theater of Opera and Ballet found a place for her in the costume room. Sue fabulously beautiful costumes. It was what she dreamed of all her life, and where her talent manifested itself. John by this time had already graduated from law school. He had a good apartment where he brought Selena. The young man worked in a large company, and here he had a chance to make a career. Selena entered the institute. Now she had at least a few years of carefree youth ahead of her, which fate had always denied her before. Only one thing happened during those months. Selena was told that her own father was looking for her. A distant relative called her and asked to meet her. You see, his life didn't work out, she said. He started drinking. No one expected this. There are no alcoholics in his family. No one understood why he was addicted to alcohol or how serious it was. But the further it went, the worse it got. His second wife tried to treat him in one drug treatment center, in another, but he could only hold out for so long. Eventually, she packed up and left. He tried to get her back, had a few ugly scandals. He said she used him, an old man, and then left him. She replied that she did not want to finally ruin her young years living together with an alcoholic. Took the kids and left. As you can see, there's nothing left of his farm. But the worst thing is that your father began to go blind. Anyway, now he's an invalid. He still has some money in his book, and he wants to give it to you and apologize. He says he feels bad for you. Maybe that's why things went wrong for him. Will you talk to him? Selena was quiet. He doesn't have to apologize to me as much as he does to my mother, she said. He's more to blame for her. I don't need his money. The thing is, I don't know where to put him now, the relative confessed. He can't live alone. He would be taken to a nursing home. But you know, they have places for those who have their own place. And your father's wife took everything away from him. He has a room in a former dormitory, 8 meters, and the ceiling is leaking. Leaving him there means he'll just leave in a few months, even if the social worker starts bringing your father food. There are enough alcoholics around, they'll carry everything. And I can't take him in. I just had a daughter. There was silence again. Probably the relative decided that Selena should be greased. You see how everything in life comes back, she said in a heartfelt tone. At one time your father left you, and now he himself no one needs. Probably, as long as he has to live there, he will repent that he did that to you and your mom. Life is like a boomerang. Everyone knows that. He's got a nice pension. Why don't you think of a way to make it work for your dad? You don't have a little room where he could lie down. You married a rich man, didn't you? I'll see what I can do, Selena said discreetly. And of course they discussed it with John in the evening. I know you're very kind, said her husband, but you've given so many years to others. You've never lived the life you wanted to live. And now I can see it in your eyes. You're ready to throw away more time on a man who put you in boarding school and never visited you. I'm not gonna let that happen. We'll figure something out. A week later, he found a place in an old people's home. It was a private institution, modest but clean and inexpensive. Old people lived in a room of 4 people. They were not only fed and looked after their health, but even entertained. There was a music hall here. School children came with concerts. Now you will be calm for him, John said, and your conscience will not gnaw at you, and to visit him. You know, I don't want to, Selena admitted. He's been a stranger to me for a long time. Katie was finishing her studies at the theater studio, where she was rightly considered a star. Selena often thought how great it is when a person is in love with his work and sincerely ready to devote his life to it. However, part of this life Kathy was ready to spend on something else. Together with Selena, she visited her mother in the hospital, and there she met a young doctor, and apparently, their relationship was developing rapidly. As for future roles, now Selena was sure Katie could play anything.